Okay. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode. The title is An Understanding That Dispelled Fear. And honestly, this episode was really inspired by an observation I had from this show. This very interesting show. This Japanese comic book turned into a show where there's one scene where there is a character in this show where he's very, the character is intelligent, but he's afraid. In the show Shingeki no Kyojin, there's this character named Armin. And this character, something unique happens where for the first time he figures out the successful plan. And he goes into this one scene. It's like a really short scene. I think many people will not even notice. But in this one scene, his hand is on this sword and he says, "I feel courage flowing through me." And the character smiles. The character, as he says, courage flows through me, it was this totally different view than a pre-established identity, rather a living experience. Every time I come to wonder about what's happening in the room of consciousness, what that means is a person wakes up to the world, even though we're born in it. But we wake up to it. That means we physically exist, but we're not a person. And the biggest mysterious thing about memory is that it begins before the person is a person to themselves. Before the child, the infant has a personality. The memory, it's like the camera. Like think of the person's brain to be like a camera, like your eyes to be a camera. So these eyes are recording, but they are not recording consciously, as if the brain is engaging the world regardless. My heart is beating right now, regardless of any opinion I have. We look at an existential design dimension. And when you look at existence, as I was saying, like the heart, a lot of things in nature don't have a personality. A person can see a wild animal, let's say you see a bear in the forest, right? You can't be like, "Bear, please walk the other way." The bear is just gonna, charging you. The thing is that nature doesn't have a personality. We human beings have a personality. This personality is based on the world happening within us in another way, overlaying on top of the outer realm. Or how many times have you seen in shows where, I don't know, some insincere character at the end makes a mistake and some evil monster's about to, like, I don't know, devour the character, and the guy's like, good boy, good boy. It's like a three-headed lion or something, So the idea is that we interact with the world as a person, but nature is not happening as a person. And our species is so keen to call itself Homo sapien. That means we have suddenly, in the 4.5 billion year movement, a little phase of it, we're like, yeah, let's brand ourselves as this, and specifically with this trait and that. It's like in the middle of nowhere, we have started telling ourselves stories that have become reality. This is honestly the situation. If there was no language, there was no communication, personality, any of this, there were no identity. It's as if it's just a silent existential movement. Anybody who doesn't have contentment with this silence and with this silent existence, as if existence doesn't owe any experiencer per se anything specifically. If we consider it, it's on an elemental level, as if like the periodic table doesn't owe bad karma or good karma, It's like the periodic table doesn't have karma. Until what's in the periodic table becomes a personality. We use a grocery bag to carry our items, to carry multiple items. And we are using an ideology bag to carry various memories and experiences, some humanized, some dehumanized. Right? We think we're just human. No, in deep sleep, that's not a human state. Deep sleep is not human, because there is no consciousness of a human active. In the dream state, you may appear as a human. You may appear as something else. That's kind of like your mind moving your body in the dream state. In the waking state, your body's in the driver's seat. Either imagination and reality is wrong. This relationship we have with these two words. It should be either two types of imagination or two types of reality. To have one be abstract, one not be abstract, yet they are found in the same space, it's as if it's like it's like a person in a group who feels they're not being seen. Existence, believe it or not, you should treat it as like a child or a fool. Let me tell you what I mean. Let's say a person on this planet experiences something evil, like sees something evil happen, cruel, right? And the person can't do anything about it. Imagine. that cruelty should either be accepted, we're like, holy shit, that's some cruel evil in the planet, right? Or we look at it as if it didn't know better. That means if the person looks at the situation, whatever situation, from the future self, as if the past didn't know better. You look at it from your past self, why didn't the present know better? Why didn't people know better, right? If you look from the past, right? If you live from your past, there is fear, suffering, regret, burdens, you know, ignorance. Why? Mainly because the past is past, and those inner events, they're like in a toolbox. That means my relationship with my past, whatever happens, because I know every moment turns to the past. That means any moment I go through, the next moment, that moment has become the past. So if the person pays a little attention to the past and they're going through in a changing world and their attention is to the future, their past doesn't become a justification for how their future should be, right? It can. I mean, we have people who are working hard, you know, it's like the person didn't have something, now wants to have it, now has the motivation, but we can't consider ourselves as intelligent being until we know not just where we are locally based on matter, but where we are based on space. The relationship of space and intelligence, you can say this was left to the mystic traditions, to spiritualism, to that faction of ideology. So what that means is we have to, in this modern society, establish a new relationship with intelligence, and intelligence in space and as space, right? Right now we talk about space beings, extraterrestrials, cool, man, but what if space is a being? That means there's two types of space beings, extraterrestrials and then space that is being consciousness unconditioned to any form. The past always has many opinions. That's the nature of it. The past has more reasons to deny something than see it possible. It's like talking to someone with a sophisticated business degree and you ask them about the business, and the first thing they tell you is that the business is not going to work. And it's as if you look at that person and you're like, buddy, I mean, like, everybody knows there's a 50-50 chance the business is not going to work. It's the explanation, the actually looking at it, that really, you know, changes things. I was even recently I was watching on YouTube a video on, believe it or not, different people with different psychologies. It was this channel that was showing people with different psychological positions, let me say for now. And I was actually debating between these two topics to talk about tonight, but I guess I can kind of mesh them together. Excuse me. I was thinking about the person and fear being for a person. Because we're different people, it is true that others have fear. It's not just like a person, just because they're fearless in one room doesn't mean they're not afraid of something else, right? A person could be an incredible, like physically, an incredible warrior, right? But when it comes to, for example, talking gently, they can't. You know, or a person is very in one dimension, they don't have fear because they've had exposure, repetition, and a sort of attempt of endless endurance in that domain, right? Anything you get acquainted to, it's like familiarity, right? So this is why I would say an understanding that dispelled fear, that understanding familiarizes you with an unknown complex situation through known simple ways. The known simple ways create a foundation where fear doesn't need to be there. That means fear is an incomplete analysis of the moment. You know, there's a saying, they say the enemy of my enemy is my friend. You know, and you can say the fear of my fear is my friend. That means the person, I don't know, the person's afraid of spiders. They open it, like they get a piece of wood and, you know, they lit a medieval torch like back in the day, and, you know, back beast, back, like the person says it to the spider, you know. You use the fear of that which you, the fear of your fears, the fear of your fear can be used to counter your fear. That's one strategy. The other strategy is understand your way out of ignorance. And this is the coolest thing. This is something where the word understanding, first it makes you feel, what am I standing under? What is this? You know? But then it becomes a direct experiential entrance. That's what understanding becomes. You see, if you care for the reality of the result, most people have fictitious outcomes, I've noticed. And it's not bad, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's not ideal either, right? Imagine a person wanting to be a robot. They want to be a giant robot, you know? That's a fictitious outcome. Right? Now, this doesn't mean if they work hard, one day they won't sit in a giant robot. But it means for all that time that they were thinking they were going to be a giant robot, for example, you know, it's all that time where they missed out on the opportunity cost of a totally different psychological display, right? We have these terms in modern psychology. Okay, let me keep this for another episode. But pretty much the fragmentation of the psyche. We have built a civilization where you're required to be a single personality. The single personality has to go at a certain speed and has to align to the values and the chessboard of society to be a chess piece in it. That means it's like you break the rules when you don't want to participate anymore, or when you're tired of the continuity of the game, right? You can say a soccer player, there's been soccer players who've been angry. The soccer player has been so angry, the referee has shown him the red card. The soccer player doesn't want to leave the field. It's been like embarrassing. Right? But it was like, you know, the person wanted to break the rules because they had committed to the idea, I don't care about this game anymore. You know, I care about myself more than the game. Right? Now we're living in a society where people can act like they care for the outer realm, but the moment things become hostile, then it's left to the decency of their natures. You know, that means it's as if, like, they say, I think it was Charles Bukowski, he's like, you know, he said something similar. Other poets, I think Rumi said something similar, where it's like, at times of joy, thousands gather around. But then when suffering comes, nobody's there to endure it with you, for example. You know, this shows, this was the thing that showed the real friends of the soul of that being, right? Like, I'll give you an example. Like, I have a twin brother. When we were young, we would get into fights. Now, there would be a situation where the moment my twin brother would get into a fight, it didn't matter if he was fighting one person, two people, three people, four people. I would automatically just go in. People knew that if you fought with one of us, you were fighting with two of us. But at that age also, like, you know, I was a bit young and ignorant as well. You know, there's whenever a fight happens, it's as if there is some sort of karmic entanglement, you can say. So it would be a situation where deep down what society needs is not a happy face, you know, sticker of goodness, you know, on the face of people. You know? What it needs is human beings that have never existed with such DNA, as 8 billion beings each have their unique DNA, to naturally exist and care for the natural level of things. Right? It's that the language has made us, it's not that language has made us artificial, it's that the language has made us artificial when we are natural. Right? And that's a flaw. That's like an error. That's like a computer, that's like imagine consciousness, the mind is the software, and the body and the brain is the hardware. Right? So that's like an error, that's like a software error. It's like the person lives a life and they're like, no way, this whole time I thought I was just me. But society is endless programming of what the sight of the person was exposed to till now. You know, I would say a wise person would feel like a sculpture in today's world, if they wanted to be honest, right? Because the conditioning is there. It's as if a child is like clay. Do you know? And the younger the child is, the easier the clay is molded. This is why children learn easier when they're young. You know why? Because they don't have a reason to complain. The child doesn't have a concept that it's okay for it not to do something. Do you know? So the parent's like, wow, this child doesn't know. Go to this class, go to that class. There's these like super young kids in certain Eastern countries who at a really young age they're put into violin classes, piano classes. You know, what am I saying? Even Mozart. Mozart was like a 6-year-old kid. Pretty much it's like after breastfeeding he picked up the violin. So Mozart was a 6-year-old prodigy. Why? Because he was born in a family where his father was a musician and he was just watching that. It was literally like a camera dropped from the sky and started recording in a receiving from its environment. You know? Oh man, that's the Mozart thing was so silly. Exposure, and when you're exposed to something, suggests how intensely you absorb it. I noticed something personally. In my youth, I spent some time with my grandparents. Me and my twin mother, we would go to my grandparents' house, and she was a religious lady, you know, old religious lady, my grandfather, grandmother. And I remember, just because we were happy, they were very nice people, I was nice people, it was as if the environment was pleasant, so it was as if it was a complete interpretation of the religious environment, as if it's friendly, you know? Then you come into, it's like years and years and years later, then you see it's as if the idea, it's like the ideas that were there when I was a child that I was emotionally happy with, right? These ideas it wasn't a factor. It's as if children are learning a human language before an intellectual language, right? I think that's what's missing maybe. A life-sensitive human language, right? A language that is not per se spoken with words, a language of empathy, an emotional language, right? So I would say children are emotionally deciding, right? The child has a toy, you take the toy away, the child cries. You give the toy back, the child is okay, right? So it's an emotional decision of how behavior expresses, right? And it makes sense because prior to emotions, it's temperature. Young children, when they're born, it's so important that as they're being taken care of, they're hugged by the mother, right? The child actually feels like temperature, a sort of cozy human shield or something. That's so important. For example, the child psychology. It's like the behavior of the child is based on its temperature, right? The tears of the child based on the physiological comfort, discomfort. As we get older, people don't care about their temperature. They don't cry like a baby when they go into a cold room anymore. But now the temperature of ideology and the inner rooms, the rooms of language we find, right? Every person I speak, I treat it as if it's a room. It's a new room, as if I've entered this room for the first time, and I'm hearing this person for the first time, and I'm hearing also myself speaking to this person for the first time. You see, it's like the unknown leaves the person with this wisdom that it's okay to continue, right? We've been conditioned that you have to know. It's cool to know, right? But we haven't realized all of knowledge is to respond to what we see that is unknown. People are just trying to figure things out. Knowledge is the story we tell ourselves so far. And this story is always updating. And if you want to be idea-centric, then you go into a narrative of the world where the world doesn't change. So, we are a psychological human being inside the body of an animal. And let me tell you what I mean by this. Why do I say inside the body of an animal? Just because we wear clothing, just because we overlay something upon ourselves that no animal on this earth has done. We wrap ourselves around something that no creature does as a survival strategy. We wrap ourselves around, we wrap a world inside a world. We wrap this world into another world and treat that as what we know. So, you see animals, they just go based on their instincts. If the animal just went based on its instincts, it just stays it's like the environment is programming the animal's mind, right? We are the only creature in nature that managed to bypass the voice of, nature. And I would say this is why we're so keen on freedom, right? Freedom, that it's like the natural world doesn't move the self, the world doesn't move the self moves the world. Right? That's where we have come to. Right, so Lies in the chat section, Lies That Bind, says when the child, there was a psychological study of toddlers, they put a sticker on their cheeks, and each day they would walk by and look in the mirror. The study noted the day the child noticed the sticker. When the child became aware of the sticker, it was not them. Yes, so Lies That Bind, this point you're making in the chat section, I'll say, here's the thing. Jacques Lacan said it another way, right? So that, I mean, putting a sticker on a toddler's face is probably gonna, like, mess up their cheek, but, like, like, it's gonna be uncomfortable, but like, the toddler should probably take it off. But, what you're saying is very close to the lines of what Jacques Lacan said, the mirror effect, right? So it's like the same thing as a child noticing it's like a human, its reflection is not itself, right? So that sticker would be, I would say, maybe even an advanced version of that. So anyways, the idea, that's a very good point, that it's like after some point we notice we're being something and we're like, no way, so that's who I am. We wear clothing, you know, we build buildings, we do things that do not relate to just animalhood, right? So we can't say we're just animals, but all we see is an animal's body, right? So we don't see anything more than that. So either there's a problem with our sight, or there's a problem with what we're seeing, right? Either the one looking is wrong, or what is being looked at has an issue. There's the optical illusions from the outer realms, or it's an optical illusion from the inner realms. There can be illusions in the inner realms, right? The whole point of life is try to keep it yin-yang, right? Where if you suddenly get pulled to your inner realms, let's say an existential crisis, right? Like a philosophical existential crisis. What is this? Oh my God. You know, the person's like freaking out, right? In that moment, there is more chaos in the inner realms, so you see a bit of order. What that means is, if it becomes metaphysically complex, use the simplicity in your outer realms, right? You see that in Zen. The person went through something intense, then he's like, look at the moon and the dewdrop on that grass. Like, that was the totality of the wisdom. Why? Because through that simplicity, the inner realms could be maintained in a complex way. The more minimalistic your outer realms are, the faster your inner realms move. Because there is less emotional lockdown. It's like the thing they say, the more we own, or what we own ends up owning us. And it doesn't own us, it owns the attention to it. This was the whole thing about the psychology of the master and what's the term? The dominator psychology, the dominant psychology, and the less dominant psychology. Right, so in ancient times, the master-slave psychology was looked at that way, and anyways, the idea that the person controlling is trapped by what they're controlling, and the person being controlled is trapped by what is controlling them. Both don't evolve. Both have to stare at each other's face. That means all the dictators, right? All the dictators in the world, if they one day woke up, you know, and they didn't like what they see, it was as if they were attached to it, right? That's the thing about power. With it comes great responsibility. Honestly, Uncle Ben from Spider-Man was like an enlightened yogi, you know. With great power comes great responsibility. And that's why Peter Parker decided to mask his face, you know, rather than be his true self. It's like Uncle Ben's like, with great power comes great responsibility, and he just puts a mask on his face. Uncle Ben's like, the fuck, before he dies. Sorry guys, I got silly there. But anyways, with great power comes great responsibility. But the human being in the outer realms is an animal, in the inner realms is an attention, is the presence of an attention that like a spotlight can be navigated. Fear has a definition, and I'll read it for you. Let's see if the dictionary has fear, guys. Let's see if we can reverse engineer from the language. So fear is, who knew? Fear was a noun and a verb. So an unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous, likely to cause pain or a threat. So an unpleasant emotion by an assumption of what will happen. That's kind of one definition. It says a feeling of anxiety concerning the outcome of something, yeah. The likelihood of something unwelcome happening, yeah. A mixed feeling of dread and reverence, yeah. And then we get to the verb. It says be afraid of, as likely to be dangerous, painful, or threatening. Or used to express regret or apology. Or archaic, regard with God with reverence and awe. So fear also means reverence in an archaic manner, context. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is that we can see it's a relationship of the present with the future that hasn't happened based on an ability to see a probability from the past. So if the person thinks what they see is the only thing, they are seeing 50% of the moment. So self-certainty just in the inner realms, it can lead to a lot of fear in the outer realms, right? It's like more and more as the days turn into nights and the nights turn into days, we realize we are multidimensional. That means we look at the person. There was a time we looked at a person and there was no language. We were just animals. Maybe like human contact was something like this, was maybe like there was no mind. Nature was our mind. That's the cool thing. And then we came to a position where we could notice this relationship. We could notice how we are the inventive life force in the moment. Think of it back in the days, creatures, two creatures of the same species all scattered in the forest or something. Suddenly they two of the same kind look at each other, right? They notice each other. That was a very profound moment, you know, tribalism, just how our species got to tribalism. Slow hand clap for that achievement, you know, just how it naturally got there, right? Because we say before the tribe is made, there is no language, right? There is communication maybe, but there isn't language. It's only when the tribe is formed and people are stable positions in the society where they can start being parts of the society. You know, being alive in reality, especially as groups of people, it's like being vacuumed in an imagination that is not yours. When I look at nature, when I look at the unknown, that's like the edge of my mind, really. Understanding dispels fear. Because it's an accumulation of various angles of experience. Think of it this way. Think of it as a mysterious alien, a giant alien, let's say like a Hollywood movie. Like a giant alien appeared, okay? And this alien wasn't dangerous, but nobody knew what it was. Right? It was just like this giant alien appeared, or a giant spaceship appeared, right? We would have to test it. If, let's say it's an alien, this giant alien, we would have to test it. Yeah, we would have to engage it from different angles to get a picture, to understand it. So understanding is just accumulating more angles on something, right? For example, I was seeing the Joe Rogan podcast, and Joe Rogan was of course, very humble, incredible human being, but he was treating himself as if he was small when it comes to knowing in this universe, right? And there was something where it's as if he's probably one of the most rarest human beings who has seen so many multiple angles on things that it's like even in his unconscious. Right? When a person who goes through an experience, something remains in there, right? The inner realms are moved by you. You are your inner realms in a sense. Your outer realms can be moved by you, and in current wisdom says should be moved by you. But if you experience yourself timelessly, then you can still move in the outer realms, but there is no mover. Like throughout the day, I tried this. That one day it was like I woke up and I'm like, what is this? The whole day I'm being a sense of self to myself. That means and then if you tried for one day to just be a watcher, that means kind of being as opinionless as waking up in the morning. It's as if you don't have an opinion on anything yet. So staying the same unknown watcher that wakes up, imagine throughout the whole day. Honestly, it's language games. Everything is language games. Everything is known communicatable variables, The variables that we can't communicate, we either attempt to rename, create, or connect it to something we already know, because what else does an explorer do? It's as if they explored the free world like Christopher Columbus, and they called it They called them native Indians, as if it was India to them. You know, it was as if a past archetype came, even though it was a new territory, for example. So even the naming was wrong. Language is not clarity, right? Language is just temporary filling the void of the person. The true wise ones of this world, as the poet Rumi says, all silence is the language of God, all else is poor translation. That means every word we use is a finger pointing to the truth. And I'm claiming, because somebody has to do it in history, you know, somebody has to come and take this chess piece, this chess position of saying we're not language directly. Language is a technology. Our identities are Iron Man suits that arise based on the stimulus in the outer realms, you know, the phenomena, outer realm phenomena, and the inner realm noumena, the inner realm events, right? An inner realm event is really when a person gets angry, let's say violence, right? When there's violence, it's as if the inner realms have decided to move faster than the outer realms and decide for the outer realms. It's like it's how they say anger is blind. An angry person can't be reasonable. Why? Because there is no reason. For them it's a point of wrath, right? It's a point of slamming the hammer down, you know, or putting people in their place, right? That's the biggest reason people get angry. But what's interesting is that if people were not afraid, and let's say everybody on this planet was a next level martial artist, let's say there was still violence on the planet, but everybody, like there was this vitamin, you could eat this vitamin and you'd instantly know jiu-jitsu, you know, you know, or something, you know. You just ate I don't know, a jiu-jitsu supplement, you know, like a black belt supplement, you know. In that world where everybody would be able to fight, you see, then you won't go looking for fights. That means those people who are violent, they are just looking for human punching bags. That's it. Because the person can do the same thing in cyberspace. That means if there was a cyberspace simulation, the person could exert their anger. Can you imagine people in a bar instead of street fighting, you know, fighting in the street, they go into this virtual reality booth and they choose the map they want to fight, whether it's medieval, ancient Rome, sci-fi, you know, whatever, and then they start fighting each other in cyberspace. And at the end, nobody is hurt. They were just hurt in cyberspace. So because the identity of the person getting angry is a subject, it's not an object. So its pressure can be released in a subjective way. That means it's as if the person getting angry, they haven't, Isaac Asimov said this, the anger that becomes violent I'm talking about. I mean, anger that comes and goes sometimes, I mean, it's based on the outer realms, it's temporary. If the person's always angry, that anger is based on an inner incident, not an outer incident, you know, not an outer event. Our attention is the clue. That means all those people looking for spirituality, looking for interdimensional creatures, all those people being esoteric, doing rituals, you haven't realized you're the miracle in the room, not something outside of you. Right? This is when a person gets comfortable with their presence. And if you get comfortable with your presence, it's not that you don't fear. You fear, but you fear from a stable watching place. That means it's as if there isn't an emotional attachment on how existence changes. Right now, there's an incredible attachment to everything. Right now, people are getting, it's like the crucible for comedians now in the West, it seems. I saw a video the other day. It's like the witch trials, you know. So there's so many things happening right now, and the species has so many different kinds of relationships with language, and there's so many different cultural programs, and there's so many new human beings entering the system that really it's not about saving the past or finding truth anymore. It's just about building the stage for the performance of the future generations. I see no other greater purpose. I don't know what people are doing with their lives, you know. And I'm a fool, you know, from my own corner of the universe saying this, but there is something that either we want our future generations to take physical steps ahead, we want their advancement to be only the outer realms, or we want their advancement to be their vision. Right? So it's as if the person wondering, do I want my child, let's say if you have a child in the future, you know, for those people who don't have children, it's like, do I want a child that is strong physically, or do I want a child that sees a lot from the moment, you know? And the answer should be both. But I'm saying it's like, when it comes to a choice between, it depends on your yearning. Some people yearn for a certain level of a mystery, then they get answers, then they live, right? It's like a person can't just explore, of course, 24/7 either. But I don't know, it's like, what else can energy do other than use itself somehow? And now we are, instead of nature being responsible for us, we have become responsible for nature. But are we being responsible for nature? No, and that's the weird thing that's happening in society. We are being unnaturally natural. You know, it's like we have egos, super unnatural, but then who has the ego? It's nature. And really, it's as if, imagine fear was a door. It's a door. What can the person do? They either open it or they move along to other doors. Now, if the fear is emotional, on an emotional level, then there's complexities, because when a person gets emotional, their psychology fragments. It becomes a bit kaleidoscopic. And let me tell you what I mean by that. I feel emotions are comparisons between two simultaneous moments that have become real in the psyche. Two or more. So it's like an entanglement of various senses of self, right? So I'll give you an example. The person was young, and somebody pushed them. They didn't get to push that person back. Then I don't know, years pass. Then the person gets pushed, and suddenly he just pauses, right? Accidentally, let's say he gets pushed or something, right? The person suddenly pauses and suddenly shouts, "How dare you push me?" and pushes the other person back, right? Intensely, right? And the reasoning is because it was a change from how the person had accepted themselves in another moment prior. That's why we become emotional. And here comes the big philosophical discussion here, which I would say the world has to decide, right? And specifically the women of the planet have to decide. That does emotion stay in the driver's seat, or does emotion stay in the passenger seat? The way the world's going, emotion's not going to stay in the driver's seat. And that's the huge philosophical discussion. Would we rather want emotionally stable, happy people, you know, or intellectual robots fighting for precision, fighting over precision. It's like, what do we want as a species, right? And based on our behavior, we program it for the future generations. They ask the person, do you have fear? And the person's like, I have what? And the person's like, fear. And the person's like, I've never heard of it. What is this fear? And that was the end, you know? The person had never heard of fear. So they didn't have fear until they realized the concept. It's like before the concept existed, it was just emotion. It was a vague emotion. It wasn't like a certain fear, you know? And it's just multidimensional management, where our mind's life is instantaneously vocational and multidimensional. The body's life is singular. That means think of how many days you have woken up as a human being and you've had different views on your own biological existence. How many days you have woken up and your mind's been like a light in the room, in a dark room, and the body's there in front of it, you know? You know, even though my biological eyes are first person, but when I ask myself, if I were to close my eyes, can I see what's behind me? And the answer is yes, but it's not reliant on the visual sense. It's reliant on, so let's say I look in front of me and I see, okay, let's say I walk into a room and I look at that whole room. Then I put my face in the corner of the room where I'm not looking at any of the other corners, and let's say somebody comes in a room and there was a lamp in the room and somebody breaks that lamp, right? And let's say underneath that lamp on the table there was a drum, okay? There was a drum there or something, you know? So there was glass. Let's say there was a glass soccer ball. This is a pretty random example, but let's say there was a glass orb, okay? So imagine my face is pointed to the corner of a wall. I've walked in the room, I've seen the lamp, I've seen the glass orb, but now my visual eyes only see the corner of the room, right? Now somebody comes in the room behind me, imagine, and hits this lamp, slaps the lamp in the face, and the lamp falls down on this glass orb, and both the lamp breaks and the glass orb breaks. Now my eyes have been just to the corner of the wall the whole time, but the ears can pinpoint the incident. Use the memory I had when I first walked into the room to fathom what just happened, and I would instantly know by looking at the corner of the wall, the lamp fell on the glass orb. So I would be able to see through my ears in regards to the overall feedback the senses are bringing. The senses are like these lines that come back to the center. You know, it's like this kind of, each one is like it's like an infinity symbol. Our senses are propellers. Our senses are like, imagine a bunch of infinity symbols, you know, being like propellers of an airplane. You know, so it's as if our senses are constantly coming. The infinity symbol explains that, you know, my lab. The infinity symbol explains it. The way our ideas circulate. Yeah. Wow. This whole time, infinity was in disguise. Sorry guys, I gotta write this down. Huge realization right now. Okay. So just an outer realm object becoming an inner realm subject, that inner realm subject then being able to move and then changing how the outer realm object means to us. When a person, for example, speaks nice, then speaks rudely, it's as if before there was in the inner realm of others the impression of nice, then suddenly the impression, a different inner realm appearance came. Right, so the ability is, to be honest, every person, if we truly ask them what they want, right, we would find everybody has idiosyncrasies. That means the word weird, for example, or strange or odd, when everybody has a different DNA, never made sense. It only made sense in a theme of a sort of a great story. That means that when life is no longer just language, then the mysteries of experience come to you, right? It's another way of saying when a person has learned, for example, from the outer realms, you have learned enough from the outer realms, at some point, some incidents and some events in life, some flows in life will take you to your inner realms. And that means now is the time. It doesn't matter what age you are, it doesn't matter how old you are, when you are. It's just, when did that come? It could be your karma. You could be a child born in a family of people who are spiritual, for example. You know, you could be a person born in a completely different situation. At some point in life, you know, the person will wonder, where is the outer realm being processed? And the inner realm doesn't have a location. And now we see why we're all philosophers deep down. We're all wonders of the living realm. So fear is dispelled also by the macrocosmic picture. That means, let's say a person fears running too fast. But that person has to run to work every day. After so many points, it's like running fast becomes like no longer fast for him. You know, anything you train, after a while, it becomes second nature. That's just the nature of life. You know, it's like whistling too. At first, it's a mystery. Then it becomes something that's regularly trained, and then it becomes nature, second nature. Then once it becomes second nature, the attention moves on, right? It's as if the mind doesn't, like the body eats food, but the mind, the brain requires food, but the mind requires engagement with possibility. Engagement with possibility. And if a person doesn't have the strength in this life, it's not to be or not to be, it's to be moved or not to be moved, you know, or to move or to be moved. If you want to be moved, then you can instantly treat the world like a snapshot photo, become an idol worshiper, ideal worshiper, or for all these factions, I don't know how to say it, for all these classifications. There is, I don't know, at some point the person realizes that the soul is not an actor. The soul doesn't have legs. A lot of yogic wisdom invites the truth seeker, the sadhu, they call it, into renouncing the source of suffering. So you go through a phase, let's say, where suffering, you notice it. You notice real suffering. You notice inevitability. You notice your mortality. You notice the hourglass. That's suffering. being temporary in a world where you can desire so much, yeah, you can suffer, you know. That means desire works only if you're an immortal being. If you're not immortal, it's like desires are inefficient, too much, too heavy. I mean, not desires to, like, you know, go drink a glass of water or something. I mean desires that are trying to make the outer realms. I should say try to make the outer realms. Desires that have seen themselves before the world, right? So it's as if in any moment a person's like, what do I, like Alan Watts says, what do you desire? Now Mr. Within is saying, what does the world desire? You know, it's like in every moment you can wonder about this. And I notice we have families, the idea of families, and the idea of even nationalism, as if we're all wearing the same jersey. But where is the planetary? Where is the global, the universal level? When are these stages going to come in? Right? It's inevitable. It's going to come in at some point, right? So if you realize the world desires a universal outcome, then you can't live just as a human being with a bunch of stickers of ideology attached to your, to your consciousness. It's like Leo Tolstoy, he wrote this in Next Level Letter, and it was called Bethink Yourselves, you know? And Mr. Within would say, you know, unsticker yourselves from language. I'm telling you, one of the most cruelest things that can happen to a child is when a child does something and the outer realms say, good job, you know, good boy. You know, that is the cruelest thing that you can do to a young child, right? Because that child doesn't know itself, right? You see, that's the thing about children. It's as if they are responsible for how they receive, but until they're able to truly notice the outer realms and what's going on, it's as if they're required to be, you know, guardians, right? Now imagine we reach a point where we give a thumbs up to the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, you know? We dance our way towards universalism. And fear in the inner realms can vanish instantly. That means many people don't realize, especially those I was listening to a few lectures from the scholar Terence McKenna, those people who go into altered states of mind. The person the same, it's like as quick as the inner event takes place, the inner event can go. An inner event would be, for example, someone, I'm meshing the examples. Fear is an energetic event as well. That means energetically something happens when a person fears, right? And it could be that it's like in a moment of fear, a person is pushed back to another point in their memory where they, let's say they felt the echo of that fear. You know, they can feel The current fear is an echo of that fear. I think the confusion is that a moment in the past is trying to fulfill itself. It's as if the person, let's say that person, that example I used earlier, a child getting pushed, and then years later, when they're all grown, suddenly getting pushed. So that child getting pushed, it's as if that child didn't finish the moment. That child didn't push back the other child, you know? So that person, it's an incomplete moment. Our suffering are moments that were incomplete. Our inner realm suffering, anger and emotion is because of that. It's moments that were not completed. Or inner realm efforts, as if a sort of program was being implemented, an application of the mind, the way the mind was applying itself, and it didn't finish it, right? So that child didn't get to push the other kid back in its youth. Then when it grew, when it was old, suddenly someone pushed it. All that like slingshot of like tension that person held, like suddenly came out, you know? You know? So they suddenly, so I'm saying that an emotion is multiplicity of selfhood. And I think the best thing a person can do when there's let's say we give like alarm levels, like we say they're like dangerous emotion, like the threat level of the emotion, right? How much is the emotion in the outer realms? If a person, let's say, I've seen people who get angry. I saw it once. Someone who got angry and he was about to hit someone, but because that person was their relative, right, they just hit themselves. The person couldn't hit the other person, so he got angry and he just hit himself. You know, he released the anger on himself. You know, that means even if the person was intoxicated, at least was man enough to release the anger on himself, not on others. The Buddha said anger is like burning coal. Pretty much it's like your hands burn and others burn. So if you have anger and your hands are burning, don't throw it on others, at least, right? Keep it in the inner realms and try to watch it until the anger leaves, until the witness can look through a clear sky. This book on Tibetan Buddhism, A Clear Mirror. The idea of treasure revealing from the inner realms, a sort of conquering the fear of being an object for a little while, and the fear of being able to be a pleasant subject. You know, sometimes it's not that people are not able and kind, it's just that they haven't seen it yet in them. They haven't it's as if, just like language, the words we have limit us to what we can say. The words we know limit us to what we can say. It's as if the emotions and experiences we have limit us to how we comprehend the world. continue. Understanding is light. It's like anytime a person suddenly figures something out, there's more light in the room, as if the room was dark, it's become just a bit brighter. The individual has to constantly go towards their self-brightness, right? They have to first, it's as if first there's the battle with the self. You come to a conclusion of that battle, right? And then you have character. You have your individual character based on your conclusion of that self to self, let's say, experience. Then it comes the battle of self with the outer realms and who you are in the world based on the type of world you see. A person can go get so much advice, but then they can't use the advice because the world they see is still the same world, as if the advice was from another universe. You know, so unless the person's eyes change, that means it's like the way you change yourself is two ways. Either you can instantly, if you can't, you change the world you're seeing. Either the self changes or the world changes. That means the worldview. Pretty much that's the only way knowledge works, right? We're considering ourselves as creatures on a rock, and what do these creatures know? And their attempts to know, their recorded attempts to know, is what we're considering knowledge, right? But at the same time, we have art being simultaneously meaningful and free from language, you know? So meaning is pretty much movement, and language is a movement of accepted symbols, and these symbols are accepted on a rock in the middle of nowhere. When is our species going to notice language is hollow? And if it does, what would be the strategy towards it be? What would the strategy be? Let's say 8 billion people were like, no way, we were never just the words we heard. You would live before you die. We'd create a civilization that allows people to live, allows the human being to experience multiple dimensions, like a tourist in manifestation. Like you are visiting the periodic table in human form for some time. And you know what's even more incredible? It's like all the different branches of the scientific method are like different. It's like pretty much we're 8 billion beings looking at something so big that we don't know what to make of it, and so our only strategy has been to make language, to generate it. That means it's as if everything is either unknown imagination or known reality. We live in and the worlds that live in us, and what do we do with the worlds that live in us? Honestly, if there wasn't podcasting, I'm thinking like what else I would think would be the most important thing to do. It would probably just be writing. Because guys, I'll be honest, if I could write as fast as I want, as I want to speak normally, I would have just written. But it's because when a person speaks, they can get way more out than their slow hand moving, and you know. We build a civilization that understands its fear, or tries to. That means that's the best thing you can do, at least, right? Anything you're afraid of, any problem you're in, the person has to just try to see more dimensions to it. You know, it's the same thing of how, like in customer service back in the day, the person would come in the store and the owner would be like, "What do you want?" You know? The person has to want to understand. And anyone who implements let's call it the understanding algorithm. That means in any situation you're like, the best thing I could do is try to understand the situation. The understanding will allow the patience. Patience will allow further observance of what is going on. Further observance of what is going on gives you the patience, gives you eventually a new view on the fear. What that means is, it's like, let's say the person looks at a cup of tea, and that cup of tea, they don't know if the tea is like warm or cold, right? Or they can't feel, like, they don't know its temperature, right? And let's say the room, there's too many lights, you can't see the steam or something. I don't know, somehow it's a way where you can't see this. Let's say a dark room. So you would take, okay, let's say in a dark room there's a cup of tea, okay, and you don't know it's tea, and you pick up this cup of tea and you just take your face in front of it and you just feel the temperature and the scent, you know? So it's kind of like you went, it's like there was something unknown, the problem, right? There was the problem there. Then the person just went close, went to it, relocated from their first analysis to a totally different experiential angle, and then it changed the view of the problem. Then they had a different level of information, different level of experience to discriminate, right? So it's not that, you know, we should all have like the desire of a God where things in the inner realms just fix. You know, sometimes the person has to let go of what doesn't work. That's it. That means anybody who, the problem, it's like the same, Einstein says it's the same eyes that see the problem are not the same eyes that will see the answer. That means something has to change. A journey has to be made, some sort of training, some sort of activity has to be done to change the eyes. If no activity is being done, the person is attempting, like a yogi, let's say meditating in a cave, to change the inner, right? They're trying to change the inner realms. Now the thing about changing the inner realms is that unless the biggest thing you can realize in the inner realms is your space. And in the outer realms, the most important thing we've realized is we're matter. We're moving as matter. So in front of our eyes, we are a material doer, D-O-E-R, and behind our eyes, we are immaterial being. And that's why you could say faith, trust, intuition, like the person trusting their intuition. These are literally, behaviorally, the person is going beyond the language threshold. That means, think of it this way. Let's say the person rationalized all before having faith, implementing faith. The person rationalizes and they get all the rational, they see literally like an AI computer, they see all the possibilities, but then they see there's an unknown variable. Then they realize, regardless of all the calculation, it doesn't matter how much we're behind the door, 8 billion people are behind the door, and they're like, yeah, I believe this door is like this, I believe this door is like that, I believe this door is made of body, made of mind, made of soul, made of, I don't know, the imagination of the gods, the dreams of the invisible, whatever, right? So, but we're all graffitiing a door rather than opening it. Those who open it experientially become knowers. When they become experiential knowers, they notice something unconditional. They remember self before self. And then there is no self anymore. It's kind of like from the outer realms, you went within. You will become a person where just for the sake of speech, you need to say outer realm, inner realm. Because energy is being. And it's being in one moment. Energy is being. And through how it's being, what is being done is being done. Right? That means I have a relationship. It's like people, they say they have a relationship with like nature, the spirit of nature. That's lovely and important and necessary, especially imagine having a relationship with the spirit of unknown energy, unknown instantaneous energy. That means you didn't ask the gods for help. You didn't ask anything for help. You just tuned into the energetic way that the realm is. Everything beautifully is energy. Right? So energetically, we can't discriminate against one another. We can't say even existentially. It's like a person's existing more than another person is existing. We're all existential in this space. Imagine, I just thought of a thought in the future. Imagine just like how a computer's screensaver changes. Imagine in the future through cyberspace technology, a house's design, inner layout, and everything in the house, the cyber overlay on the house can change like a screensaver. So in the middle of like eating lunch at the table, in like a Victorian imagined house, suddenly it becomes like a Japanese kind of like house, like after a couple hours. So guys, try to understand your fear. If you can't tackle it directly and experientially and instantaneously, then understand it until you can. That's really it. And sometimes the moment is it's a lesson in inner renunciation as well, right? Where a person can be in a moment as simple as the birds and the squirrels in nature, and also simultaneously as sophisticated as, you know, the advanced communicators of our own. Anyways, guys, oh, and one last thing to say before I end. When I said in the subtitle, when it says courage flows, and that scene in Attack on Titan, that show, courage flows us when we understand and apply. Right? Because a person can have as much understanding. You could hear the best advice in the world, but if the person doesn't move, if the person doesn't pilot, it doesn't matter how much they know about the destination. So, anyways, guys, thanks for listening. And I feel as simple as it is for the mind to generate a modality of fear, it is also as simple to generate a modality of fearlessness. So, yeah, thanks for listening. Blessings.